Hi there. Here is Armindo Fontana from York English Services. If you're watching this presentation, you are most likely an internationally trained nurse who wants to pass the CELBAN exam. Ooh, CELBAN. Scary, right? Not really. I believe that with a little bit of coaching, you can dream of not only passing the CELBAN exam, but also living and working here in Canada. Today, we're going to talk about an important component of the CELBAN speaking exam, role play number 2. Let's get started. In role play number 2, you will play the role of a nurse, and the assessor will play the role of a patient. Role play number 2 consists basically of you as a nurse giving discharge instructions to the patient. There are basically 3 tasks involved in role play 2. First, you will listen to the instructions they will provide to you. Listen carefully and try to remember something important they're going to tell you. This is not about medical knowledge, so you don't need to worry about making a mistake related to medical information. After all, they are assessing your language skills. Okay? Second, think about the instructions you need to give to the patient. Spend some time thinking about what you want to say. Of course, you cannot spend 2-3 minutes thinking, but take a little bit of time planning how you want to convey the message in your own words without changing the content of the instructions. Finally, it's time to give the instructions. It's time to speak. It's time to show that you are more than capable of interacting with the patient in a comfortable way and provide to the patient the instructions that he or she needs to follow. You have to go through 3 stages in order to successfully complete role play number 2. First, you're going to introduce yourself and collect information from the patient for verification purposes. Next, you're going to give the instructions to the patient. This is the most important and the longest stage of role play number 2. Finally, you will have to ask if the patient has any questions and wish him or her well. You are going to start by introducing yourself and by verifying the identity of the patient. You can say something like this. Good morning. My name is Armindo and I'm going to be your nurse for today. In order to confirm I'm talking to the right patient, I need to collect some personal information. Would that be okay? Thank you. Could you please state your full name? Justin Bieber. What a lovely name. How do you want me to address you? Thank you, Justin. Also, for verification purposes, I need to ask your date of birth because sometimes we have patients with the same name. What is your date of birth, Justin? That's it. You finished the first part, the first stage of role play number 2. Let's continue. The second stage of role play number 2 is the most important and also the longest, as I have already said. Here you have to give the instructions to the patient. But let me give you this strong warning. Do not read. You are supposed to give the instructions to the patient in your own words without sounding like you are reading them to the patient. Oh, that sounds scary, Armindo. How can I do that? Relax. There are basically 2 steps that you can take in order to complete this task of giving the instructions using your own words without sounding like you are reading them to the patient. First, you can change the order of the words of the different parts of the sentence of the instruction. And second, you can change vocabulary as much as you can. Changing the order of the parts of the sentence. Changing the order of the parts of the instruction is a very useful technique you can employ in order to achieve the goal of changing vocabulary. So you pass the instructions to the patient without looking like you are reading them to the patient. How can you do that? I always tell students that you can divide every single one of these instructions into two parts, into two halves, let's say. Let's take a look at the first instruction in order to illustrate this point. Instruction number 1. Check and record blood sugar levels 1 hour before and after meals. You can divide this instruction into two parts. First, check and record blood sugar levels. And second, 1 hour before and after meals. All you have to do now is to switch the order of these two parts. So you're going to start from the second part. 1 hour before and after meals, check and record blood sugar levels. See? You already sound slightly different from the original instruction. Let's take a look at another example. Instruction number 2. Follow the instructions on times and dosage of medications and insulin. You can also break this instruction into two halves. First, follow the instructions, and second, on times and dosage of medications and insulin. Again, all you have to do is to start from the back, from the end, from the second part of the sentence. The times and dosage of medications and insulin need to be followed. So you have to make a few adjustments here, but just by changing the order of the parts of the instruction, you already sound different from the original text. There is something else you can do besides changing the order of the parts of the sentence when you want to accomplish the goal of giving instructions to the patient without sounding like you are reading them. You can change vocabulary, and I want to talk now about 3 different ways you can accomplish this goal. You can use synonyms and antonyms. So instead of saying follow the instructions, you can say obey the recommendations. The word follow and obey are similar in meaning, and the same thing occurs with instructions and recommendations. They also have similar meanings. Another example. Instead of saying 1 hour before, you can say 60 minutes prior. See, these words have similar meanings as well. 60 minutes is similar to 1 hour. Before and prior mean the same thing, basically. Let's take a look at an example of using antonyms. Instead of saying stop the medication only after being instructed by the physician, you can say before the doctor tells you to stop the meds, you have to keep taking them. So the word after and before are antonyms. They have opposite meanings. Now, sometimes it's hard to remember synonyms and antonyms. In this case, you can resort to a different strategy. You can change affirmative sentences to negative sentences or vice versa. For example, instead of saying don't skip meals, you can say eat all your meals. The sentence don't skip meals is a negative sentence, and you can change that to an affirmative sentence by saying eat all your meals. Another example. Instead of saying follow the instructions, you can say do not ignore or disobey the recommendations. See? You change an affirmative sentence into a negative one. A final strategy that can be used when you want to change vocabulary is just adopting a conversational tone. So here you're just going to start talking to the patient like you're having a chit chat with him or her in the living room of your home. So if the instruction, for example, asks you to educate family members and friends about the dangers of low and high blood sugar levels, you can give this instruction by saying something like, we all have people around us who care about us, right? And they can sure help. Share with them information on what happens when our sugar levels drop or increase. See, it sounds like you're having a little conversation with the patient about what needs to be done. So try to remember these three strategies when as you try to convey the message to the patient, as you try to give the instructions to the patient without reading them, using your own words. It's important to emphasize the importance of using transition signals as you try to complete role play number 2. Transition signals are words such as first, second, next, finally, words that help people see that you are moving from one point to the next. So you can start by saying, first, make sure that you blah 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 blah. Then second, and then you introduce the second instruction. Next, then give the third instruction. Then you can say the next instruction is yada 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 yada. And then you say finally, or the last instruction, or the final instruction is, and then you share the last instruction with the patient. The last stage of role play number 2 consists basically of closing nicely the conversation you are having with the patient. Basically, all you have to do is to ask if the patient has any questions and then wish him or her well. You can say something like this. These are all the instructions I need to give to you today. Do you have any questions? No? If you don't have any questions, you are free to go home now. I wish you a speedy recovery. Have a nice day. There are 3 additional concerns you have to pay attention to in order to successfully complete role play number 2. Be ready to answer the patient's questions. Use strategies to build rapport with the patient. And pay attention to all evaluation criteria. Let me explain what I mean by that. Yes, you need to be ready to answer the assessor, the patient's questions. After you give each one of the instructions, the patient most likely will ask you a question. Now remember, this is not about your medical knowledge. You do not need to worry about making a mistake related to medical information. So it's totally fine to say, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to this question. I'm going to talk to the doctor and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Would that be okay? Yes, they are assessing your language skills, not your medical knowledge. So it's okay to say, I don't know. I'm going to talk to the doctor. I'll let you know. But it's very important that you say something. So answer the patient's questions. Also, be aware that at least at one point during the conversation, the assessor will, let's say, play hardball with you. He will pretend he's a difficult person. He's going to say something like, no, 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 I don't want to go back to the hospital. I'll be fine at home. Calm down. They're just doing their job. They're not really upset at you. Stay calm. Try to address the patient's concerns, and you're going to be just fine. As you work on all role plays, yes, all role plays, including role play number 2, assessors will be paying close attention to your ability to establish, build rapport with the patient. Or in other words, they want to know if you are capable of
connecting to the patient in an emotional way. Or let's say if you're capable of conveying the message, sharing the instructions with the patient using a friendly but professional tone of voice that conveys to the patient the idea that you care about him or her. I want to talk about some of the strategies you can use in order to build rapport. And again, I want to emphasize that these strategies are relevant to completing successfully role plays 1, 2, and 3. A first strategy is to repeat. So let's say, for example, the patient says to you, "Do I have to take the medication?" You can repeat by saying, "You want to know if you have to take the medication." So you repeated uh, basically what the patient said. You can also paraphrase or change what the patient said, repeat what the patient said, but using your own words, using different words. "I see. You are wondering if medication is really necessary." Another useful strategy to create this kind of connection with the patient is just to confirm, to say something like, "I see," or just to make it sound like, "Uh-huh," just to demonstrate that you are listening and paying attention to the patient. You can also validate the patient's feelings, concerns, or questions. You can say something like, "That's a good question," or "That's a valid concern." Another strategy that is relevant is to ask questions. You can say something like, "Could you please explain why you don't want to take the medication?" And finally, let me remind you of a very important step you can take, or a very important strategy you can use to build rapport with the patient. You should, you must use non-verbal communication. Here I'm talking about stress, intonation. So for example, you can say something like, "That's a very important question." See, by pronouncing the word very loudly, by stretching it as I pronounce it, by stressing it, I am passing a message to the patient. I am saying to the patient, "Yes, I'm glad that you asked this question because this is really important for you." So it's a way of showing that you care. And of course, now that everything is done through computers, we can still use eye contact, gestures, body language to convey the message that we care about the patient. That's the essence of building rapport with the patient, and that's something that assessors will be paying attention to as you complete the role plays, including role play number 2.
Hey, don't forget that role play number 2 is part of a speaking exam, which means that while you are completing role play number 2, assessors will be using the same criteria they use to measure your ability to speak in English in other parts of the exam. What are these criteria? One of them is initiative and confidence. So they want to see that you feel comfortable when you are in an English speaking environment. Here's an important tip for you related to this topic. Don't ask for the assessor's permission to start roleplay number 2. After you spend some time thinking about the instructions, you should just say, "I'm ready for roleplay number 2." And then you just start. You say, "I'm ready for roleplay number 2. Good morning. My name is Armindo, and I'm going to be your nurse for today." Yada, yada, yada. Okay? The second criteria is intelligibility, and intelligibility is about your ability to communicate in a way that people can understand you. And this is related to pronunciation, stress, and intonation. So yes, keep working hard to make sure that you have a clear pronunciation, and be careful about not stressing words or syllables in a word that should not be stressed. So sometimes students like to say, I live in a city, good morning. So these are unnatural ways of stressing words in English. Generally speaking, the last syllable in English is quite soft. City, morning. I live in a city. Good morning. Okay? So pay attention to stress, also intonation. Uh, Students like to say something like, let me think, I was busy today. So they kind of raise the intonation a little bit, and that's another mistake that you can make that is connected to intelligibility. One more thing that you need to pay attention here is talking fast. Oh, I should talk fast, right? No, the opposite. Why? Because when we have an accent and we talk fast, we make it harder for other people to understand us. So it's better to, of course, you don't want to speak slowly, but speak at a normal pace, and be careful about not talking fast. You actually lose points. Yes, you lose points if you talk fast. So be careful with that. Criteria number 3 is vocabulary, and we talked a little bit about how important that is for role play number 2 and what you can do to make sure that you don't repeat words and that you use vocabulary that is suitable for the audience, etc. Criteria number 4 is fluency. Words have to keep coming out of your mouth. Be careful about making pauses, about hesitating, about chopping too much. I like to speak English because you are chopping. Also, be careful about making tangent sounds. These are all things that can uh, reduce your ability to speak fluently, and this consequently will compromise your score in the speaking exam. Number 5 is structure. And when I think about role play number 2, I'm thinking especially about the 3 stages. So make sure that you go through these 3 stages. Stage number 1, you introduce yourself and ask verification purposes. Then stage number 2, you give the instructions in the order they were provided for you using transition signals. And stage number 3, you just close nicely by asking if the patient has any questions and then wishing him or her well. So there's just a logical flow of ideas. That's what structure is all about. It's about your ability to organize your ideas. Finally, grammar. Of course, you have to make as few mistakes as possible. Of course, you will make mistakes, so don't panic. Don't um, freeze. I have seen many times students freezing when they see that when they realize they're making too many mistakes. Now, if you notice that you have made a mistake regarding grammar or pronunciation or any other factors that I mentioned here, if you can correct yourself, that's fantastic. Otherwise, stay calm and move on. Don't let fear interfere with your ability to complete the exam. Okay, so keep that in mind. You will make mistakes. Let's wrap up by reviewing some key points we have learned today. In order to complete role play number 2, you need to pay attention to the following steps. Number 1, listen carefully to the instructions provided to you. Number 2, study the instructions you are supposed to give to the patient. Spend some time thinking about what you want to say and how you want to say it. Number 3, don't read. Instead, change vocabulary and sentence structure as much as possible. Number 4, use transition signals to indicate how you organize your ideas. Number 5, be ready to answer questions and to deal with unfriendly behavior. Number 6, use strategies to build rapport. And number 7, pay attention to the other evaluation criteria, things like intelligibility, grammar, fluency, vocabulary, etc. This is a very important final advice. Stay calm. And this applies not only to roleplay number 2, but also to all other parts of the speaking exam. Actually, this is important for the reading, the writing, and the listening exams as well. Remember, you will make mistakes. It's impossible not to make a mistake. If you make a mistake and you realize you have made a mistake and you can correct yourself, do it and you will score points. But regardless of being aware enough, being capable of correcting your mistakes or not, stay calm. Keep calm and carry on.
And this marks the end of our presentation today. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope you have found it useful. Now you have all the information you need to successfully complete roleplay number 2. Now all you need is practice and feedback. Practice, practice, practice. But don't forget about the importance of feedback. You need someone who can tell you when you make a mistake, who can tell you how to fix the mistakes you are making, how to do things correctly. And that's why eWork English Service is here. We can help you improve. We can help you be fully prepared to complete not only roleplay number 2, but to pass the speaking, the reading, the listening, and the writing exams. We have developed materials that are relevant and effective in preparing people to pass CELBAN. I'm leaving down below in the description all the information you need to reach us and to have more information about our services. I look forward to talking to you. Thank you again for watching the presentation. Good luck. Have a nice day.